Hey everyone, I'm Jay Shear and welcome to Business Minds Coffee Chat. The goal of this show is to share insights, help to lift and inspire others, and deliver practical, meaningful, and actionable content. What's holding you back from growing your business? Are you creating predictable and repeatable results? Do you have a solid foundation upon which to grow? Are you taking advantage of opportunity cycles? Well, on today's episode, we're going to be talking about gaining clarity, focus, and freedom. Our guest today is a PhD who holds degrees in theology and physics. This former international runway and cover model is a highly sought after speaker, trainer, and media specialist, and the two-time best-selling author of SOAR and The Power of a Wish. She's built 4 multi-million-dollar businesses from scratch, including one before she could legally drive. She's multilingual and, as a business growth and leadership strategist, helps entrepreneurs scale to 7 figures in 1 year using a simple 4-step formula. Please welcome the iconic entrepreneur, Dr. Koni Scavella. Koni, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jay. It's such an honor to be here and to be among you and all the guests that you've had. So I'm really pleased to have gotten the invitation to join you. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I'm grateful for you being here. So I've got to tell you, I have thoroughly enjoyed trying to be a part of your world and research you and consume as much content as I possibly could. It's amazing what you've been able to accomplish. And I would love it if you would share where your story begins, Koni, and what led you to advanced theoretical physics.
Yeah, that is actually one of the most common questions I get when people meet me. They're like, give me one of those looks like my dog, right? So actually I think, when you look back at your life, you're trying to figure out how did the breadcrumbs lead me here? And I grew up in Europe, so born in Germany, in Munich, Germany is where I'm from. And so German is my native tongue. And over there, life was really wonderful. Growing up on a farm, we had restaurants and all these little shops. So life was perfect. And I thought that was always how it was going to be, simple and perfect. And then we came to America and it was complete disruption in my world. And it was hard because I didn't know any different. Everybody was kind of normal to me. But when I got here, I wasn't blonde, blue-eyed, and thin-lipped like every other girl in my neighborhood. And you know how kids, when you're young, you kind of get beat up a little bit and abused for that. So it was really hard. And I would come home and I wouldn't understand why I was so different and why that was a problem. And fortunately, my mother was like Mother Teresa, and I had great programming growing up. So we could talk about that later. But realizing that my difference actually then shortly thereafter became the difference maker. What I thought was the thing that was going to ruin me my whole life was the thing that actually made my whole life. So the fact that I look so different from everybody else turned out to be the thing that allowed me to get into modeling and make millions at it at a very, very young age. So it became a consistent theme in my life that my difference became the difference maker. And it became also kind of the crux of how I've been able to grow businesses so quickly, my own as well as the clients that I work with, by really pulling out what is it that makes you stand out and how can that be an advantage rather than a disadvantage. And I think in this world that we're in right now, if people could really start looking at that, what does make you different is actually an advantage. You just have to look for the way that you can kind of take advantage of that and highlight that.
Yeah. So if we could go back for just a moment, what age were you when you came to the States from Germany, and what was the impetus for the family coming here?
So my family owned businesses in Europe, and it was just a lot easier in that time, in that era, to be successful entrepreneurially here than it was over there. Different, cultures and governments. So I am a fourth generation entrepreneur, so it's in my blood. And age and time wise, I don't really have a concept of time. Um, and so, but I think maybe 7, 9, somewhere in there.
Okay. So coming from a entrepreneurial family, that that had to be an amazing upbringing, and the gift of being around that and the experience of seeing your own parents and family members in that entrepreneurial space. Do you feel that that definitely gave you a leg up?
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. We never had anything handed to us, right? And so everywhere we got, it was really work and it was struggle. And it was a lot of ingenuity and creativity. And, every time we'd get knocked down, we'd say, okay, so that didn't work. You got to get back up. You got to get back up. And it was never, we never counted how many times we got knocked down. We always looked at how do we get back up. And the mindset that we grew up in, you know, we were just inculcated with a mindset of can do. What can you do? And how can you do that better? And mediocrity was simply not an option. It was always an expectation of looking for excellence, being excellent. And the other thing is, it was never comparison. And I think I can see that now. It's one of my principles that I teach, is that not comparing yourself to the next person, and the next person, they have more money, or they have better connections, or whatever it is. We never actually looked outside. We just said, this is what we're doing, and then we would go for it. And I had no idea growing up how vital that is today, to have that in my background.
Yeah, that's incredible. Do you feel that you had an appreciation for that at that time? In the early years, growing up in that type of environment with that type of mindset, the can-do attitude, and uh, no mediocrity here. This is about, let's do what we can. Let's focus on solutions. Let's create opportunities.
I didn't know that much different. But I don't think I really valued it as much. We were always working hard. I sit and talk with my sisters. I'm like, do you ever remember, like, my family or my mom sitting around and just watching TV and hanging out, or anything? Like, it was not even a memory. None of us have a memory of anything like that. And there were times, as things would come on different in America, it was different, and you'd start getting TV and things like that. I'm totally dating myself, but you would get different things come into the culture, but we still had to work. It was just always part of our way of life. And I wanted to, like, sometimes be a little bit lazy. And I think there's a part of me, maybe as a result, that is lazy. And out of that, I look for systems and things like that to conquer that. But I didn't understand how important the values that were drilled into me were at the time. Sometimes it just felt a little bit like pushing, or a little bit like, can I have a break? I'm still a teenager, right? But now I'm so appreciative. It's like an athlete, right? If you grow up as an athlete and you're always training for a sport, and then later on in life, you're usually always in shape, you still have that discipline, and it's something you're grateful for at the time, but maybe you didn't appreciate the 2 or 3 a day workouts that you had to do in the beginning.
Yeah, that is super interesting. So Connie, you developed a 4-step formula to empower others to think bigger, move faster, and rise higher following a near-death experience.
Mhm.
What what's the message that came from that experience, and how did it change you? And then what is your mission today?
Oh, great question. Thank you. So the near-death experience came out of my second bout of terminal cancer, and the first one I healed without any medical intervention, and I was told 6 months to live. So I had a new motto for life, and that motto was, well, I quit my job, had a lot of money, I got 6 months, I'm going to go out in style, I'm going to spend every cent I have. And my whole goal was at the end of my life, I wanted my last check to bounce. And so it was a shift of mindset, right? I was like, okay, rather than going out and feeling all sorry for myself, I'm going to go out with a bang, right? And the second time, I thought I could do the same thing. It didn't happen because for a lot of reasons that are in the book. But um, the difference was I tried to do it all with mind. It didn't work. I did have a near-death experience where, I died, could pulled up against above my body and could see the difference. And one of the things that happened there that is going to kind of answer some of your question is that, first of all, it was the first time that you actually can see yourself. You actually see your own face. If you think about that, we never actually see our own face. We see a reflection, but we never see it, right?
Hmm.
And it was a whole different perspective of seeing me. And then pulling up also, I could see things from a greater context. And that actually is really applicable now when I look at a business. I can easily see it from that 30,000-foot view, right, above the business or above the body of the business. And it gives me a whole different perspective than the people in the business. They're like, how do you know that's going to work? How can you see that? And it's, again, seeing something from a different perspective. And being on the other side of that tunnel, like, it was a complete transformation. I like to say that the person who went into the tunnel is not the same one that came out, and completely different human being. And one of the greatest blessings I've ever had. What it did, number one, no fear whatsoever. I have no fear of this current environment that we're in, or of what's going to happen. I don't worry about that. I have no concept of time. And, even in physics and everything else, time doesn't exist. So I don't feel a sense of rush and push, or, oh, I'm not doing enough. I mean, I get some of that, but not on a time-based external pushing kind of concept.
Okay.
And so those are two things. Another thing that happened to me was the concept of non-locality, non-duality, in the sense that anything in that other realm, anything that I could think about, it would come to me instantly. I think about, well, I'd love to be there, and I'm there. Or I wish that wasn't here and it'd be gone. And the instantaneousness of that was quite amazing. To have a thought and it appears, right? And so, because you don't have that dimension of time, it's instant. Now here we are on an earthly plane, and there's some delay, so to speak. But what that taught me is the power of the mind in a much greater sense than just controlling my body, my physical health, right? I've never been sick in over 23 years.
Wow.
So how do we take that power of the mind and use it for good, right? And so when you think about something, to me, I know it's going to manifest. So then it really makes you cautious and makes you wake up and stay in a state of awareness, because everything that you think about can come to pass. So
So
what are you thinking about?
yeah. So can we dig into that aspect for a moment? Because that's incredibly intriguing to me. So when you think of something that you would like to see happen in your life and your business,
Mhm.
and you're able to manifest that, what does the process look like that you go through? So from thought to action
Mhm.
to actually creating what it is that you are interested in transmuting. So can you kind of walk through that process a bit for us?
Yeah, absolutely. I call it, there's a syntax of power and a syntax of failure, right? And how you do that process that you just mentioned, which is really spot on, is the order has to be right, right? Because just like if you're making a cake or there's a recipe, you have maybe a few ingredients, but they have to be put in order. You don't put the frosting on the dough of something first, right? And then bake it. It has to all be in an order. And so that process does start with thought. Okay. And so everything begins with that thought. What is that thought? Now, one of the things that I like to say is we don't actually create anything. It's all here. And people say, "Oh, I created this." Well, no, you actually put yourself in a state and a consciousness where that is true, and then it comes in. So everything is all happening simultaneously at once. And it's sort of like the world is a great big Rubik's Cube, right? And it has all these different squares and different things, and you're trying to get it so every side is all perfect and has all reds on one and yellows on one or blues on another, right? And that's what we're trying to do. But we come into this world with this mixed up cube, and we're trying to straighten it all out. So the first thing is you want to have that thought. And with that thought, that comes from a greater source than just our own brain. So we're tapping into something greater than us just to have that thought. Now, then the brain actually works off of images. And so if you can have, you'll have an instant image. Like, let's say I saw a commercial with kids eating a peanut butter sandwich, and I haven't eaten all day, and suddenly I'm hungry, right? That little flash of a commercial, that image triggered my brain to go on this cascade of a series of events. So the first thing you want to do is have an image that empowers you. So if I say I want to have a $10 million company, what is that image? That's the very first thing. If it's me hustling and grinding and all this work that goes into it, and I see that part of it, it's not going to be a strong image to move me forward. But if I see the end result and all these people benefiting in this creation that comes out of that, that's going to drive me. So it always starts with a thought, which the brain moves in motivation and moves forward based on an image, right? So you have thought, and then there's a feeling that goes with it, right? So that dark feeling of of slaving all night for a $10 million company, or the end result that a picture of a great product or philanthropic company, that feeling is totally different. And that feeling is going to take you to the next step, which is the action. How are you going to act with that feeling that you have? So if I have a picture and it's inspiring, like, oh yeah, Tahiti, I want to go to Tahiti, then I feel great, right? And then I'm like, okay, well, I've got to do this and this and free my schedule to get there and make the money to pay for it. So I start taking that action. And then that action will lead to the result of the money, the time off, and then the trip, right? And it's a continual, I should do it this way, it's a continual circle, right? And I say it's kind of like as a clock, right? If thought is at the top, like the letter T,
Okay.
and then at 3 o'clock you have feeling, right? So your thoughts, feelings, and then actions, and then results. Thoughts, feelings, actions, results. Thoughts, feelings, actions, results. So you always start at the top with your thought and kind of go around in this loop. And then those great results make you come back with, well, what else can I accomplish in a new thought? Now, the problem that a lot of people do is they start a different way. And they actually don't start with the thought and the image. They start with the feeling. And that's actually the syntax of failure. So they miss the key step of beginning with the thought, right? And they start with the feeling. Like maybe they wake up and like, oh, I don't want to go to this job, or I don't feel good, right? And then from that, the same syntax goes in order, right? From that feeling, their actions are, they hit the snooze alarm, they're late, they get stuck in traffic. The result is they're not productive at work. The boss tells them they're not doing well, they don't get a raise, they hate their job, they feel awful, and then that starts. Because it's about where you begin. You can start at the top with thoughts, or you start with feelings, and that's going to put you in a kind of a failure syntax. And it's all about choice, right? We have the ability in every moment to choose. Do you want to begin with your thoughts, or do you want to begin with your feelings? One will empower you and one will disempower you.
Interesting. So that's an area, or one of the areas that you would work with your clients on, is understanding that loop
Mm-hmm.
and how and where to start.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they're empowered.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, if you do the TFAR, thoughts, feelings, actions, and results, right, your thoughts will take you far. But if you start with the F, just moving that T over to the end, at the end, you get FART, right? So we don't want to be farting all over ourselves, right? So that really matters. And when you can kind of see that, it's a picture in your head again, like, oh, okay, don't start with the farts. Right?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Well, the interesting aspect to this is the action component that starts to happen, and you talk about this. But when I hear people who refer to the law of attraction as an example, if you don't attach the action piece to the thoughts, then that seems to be where it circumvents the process. So the thoughts obviously are important, and attaching the feelings to that. And then you start to build momentum, but you have to take action in order to actually move this process forward. And it's incredible. And clearly you see this in your practice, but it's incredible what happens when people start to see results and they start to understand that this actually works, right? There's science behind this. And as that momentum builds, they get excited and they want more, right? They want to continue to do this. And it's that's a great place to be.
Yeah, yeah. And then on top of that, what's interesting is, when you look at people who want to do that and they think, okay, mindset is important. I believe, especially in business, right? It's 80% mind and only 20% mechanics. But why is it that you put people in the same environment and they have the same goal or the same thoughts, and some work and some don't, right? I mean, is it a result of that theory doesn't work, or the person, right? And so you see so many people who do follow laws of attraction and other teachings, and they do it for years and years and years, and they still have no different results, right? And so I looked at that for a long time, because when I came back from my near-death encounter, that I was in a state of absolute bliss, right? I mean, I literally died and gone to heaven, right? And I was so happy. And I came back and I noticed that people weren't that way in the world. And they were really pretty miserable. And I didn't understand. I thought, oh, it's so easy, right? You just do these little things and then it works. And it wasn't working for people. And so I really started diving deeply into this to figure out, what is it? What is the difference? Why could I feel such absolute bliss up there? And then down here, people have, it's basically purgatorial for a lot of people. And so that started my kind of 12-year search into what happened to me, because I didn't know, never heard of a near-death experience at all. And I just knew I was completely different. Didn't talk about it because people might think I was a little insane and commit me somewhere. So for 3 years, I didn't say a thing, but I was just studying and observing. And that's been my pattern, right? Since I was a little girl, I've studied human behavior. And I find when you study human behavior, it's very predictable. So as a little girl, when I was very different, was shy and kind of a wallflower because I would just watch, how do I stay safe, right? That's the ultimate objective of all human beings. How can we be safe? And so I watched how people behave, and then I noticed there was a pattern to that behavior. And so I was like, oh, so if people behave this way around me, then those are people I would be afraid of. And if they do this, then it's safe. And then I started studying that. And that's really what I do today, is I really study human behavior, because that determines how they're going to do in their business and when they're going to going up and when they're going to start crashing down. And it's very predictable. It's very fascinating. And the reason some people can say, I tried, law of attraction or The Secret or any variation and it didn't work, is because I found in the 17 years of studying all of this is that there's usually one big block that they have. And if they don't get rid of that block, right, they're just layering on top, right? But that block is still there and it's holding them back. And until they clear that out, they never really get the full results. And so the difference between that and what happened to me in my near-death experience is I completely let go of everything, right? Literally and physically, right? There is I wasn't holding on to who I was or anything. There was nothing that I was attached to, completely let go. And so I was free to encounter something different. But a lot of people are very attached to something. And sometimes their goal and their objective that they're trying to reach in their manifesting, they're so attached to it that it just never happens. And because that attachment usually means I have to have this because I don't want something else.
And that's the root cause of suffering.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
So you talk about that block. Do you find with the clients that you work with, are there any common threads that you've noticed where those blocks occur? So if you take a look at 100 clients as an example, would the block that you experience or that they experience, would it be similar amongst 80% of them, or is it always different, just like we're all different?
Yeah, it's actually, it's sort of Heisenberg's, right? It's about all the conditions appearing that will cause that one block to come up. For a lot of people, the block happens one time, and it's usually a trigger somewhere between 0 and 7 years old.
Okay.
And you have this experience, something that can be traumatic in your mind, and you push it down. And other experiences come in, and we get experiences, and they come in and we push them down, we shove them down, can't deal with it right now, right? I got to work, or I got to do this, I got to take care of this, and we put it down. And then, like any good volcano, it's going to erupt at some point. And so what we want to do is get rid of that block before it does erupt and destroy your whole life. So what kind of block can it be? Well, in the years it took to figure it all out is trying to figure out, what are the blocks, right? Was my block the same as like yours or somebody else's? And that would be easy if it was just the same block. And so I narrowed it down to 4 things and studied all different religions. I lived in all different religions. So I lived as a Hindu, as a Jew, as a Buddhist, as a Catholic, and all of that, 3 months at a time, to understand all of that and to figure out, is there a commonality? Is it different based on all these things in your environment? And environment plays a big role. And it came down to 4 things, okay? And those 4 things are actually the acronym of SOAR. And it came down to 4 different blocks that people have. So the S, and then I use these blocks as an example. So the S is a sense of separation. And there's a sense of separation between what I want and what I have, right? And anytime there's that sense of separation, you've heard the thing, if you're in war, that in order to win a war, you want to divide and conquer the enemy, right? Or you can't put new wine in old wineskins. You can't hold 2 thoughts. You can't serve man and God at the same time. All these kind of things, right? All sense of separation is a delusion of power. And so when you have that, like, I want this, but I want this too, it's going to cause a problem. Okay. So you always, the question to ask yourself in that state, any state of disharmony, is there separation between what I want and what I have? Right? And if the answer to that is yes, it's just a yes/no question. It's not a fill in the blank. Let me tell you the story. It's just yes, no. And if it's a yes, then you know you're in a state of separation, and then there's an antidote for that. Okay. So that's the first one. Does that make sense?
Makes perfect sense.
Okay. So the next one that I found is O, and that's outsourcing. And this one is huge right now in the world. And so, like when I talked about growing up, we didn't compare our businesses to other people's businesses or our success or how fast we're going to others. That was so powerful, I didn't even know. Now you look at society, the number one, I think, not cause, but place where outsourcing traps people is social media, right? What do? First thing in the morning, they grab their phone and then they scroll, right? They could be in an amazing mood and then they look and all these people are doing better or so-and-so's doing this, and there goes their mood, there goes their feelings, right? So outsourcing is looking outside of yourself, just like companies would outsource labor to another country or something. We outsource our feelings, our approval, our validation, our permissions to other people. Like, you think I should do this? You think I should start this business? Oh, they don't like this, or they're going too fast. I can never catch up, right? That might be good for them, but I wasn't raised in an environment of money. I could never own my own company. So all these ways of comparing and looking outside of yourself, again, makes you powerless. And so the question for that is, when you're feeling any kind of disharmony, is, am I outsourcing in any way? Am I outsourcing or looking for validation from somebody else or something else in any way? Okay. And that's a huge one for people right now, especially I think for the younger generation. And then the next one, the third one that comes up for people is, we talked about this a little bit, the attachment. And that attachment can be to, like, I have to win or I can't lose in business, but it can also be the other attachments, the attachments to looking a certain way, the attachments that we might have to food, or attachments to alcohol or drugs, or painkillers and all these things, attachment to the news right now that people are in, right? So there's a lot of attachments. It could be attachment to a person and a relationship. So many people get so sucked down by being attached to a relationship working that it can totally destroy them, right? So then just ask yourself, am I attached to this in any way? Now, could I just walk away? And if there's a no, then there's some attachment there. And then the final one, the fourth one, is reversion. And reversion means you're just going back into the past. You're always checking, this didn't work before. How did I do that before? We've always done it this way. Hear that a lot, right? You get that a lot from the parents, like growing up. No, we've always done it this way. That's not our way. We can't do that. And being stuck in that past is also going to disempower you, right? And it's going to hold you back. So just ask, am I reverting to the past in any way in this? And if it's a yes, then that's going to be your block. And your blocks can be, a lot of people might listen to this and go, oh shoot, I'm in all of them, right?
Yeah, I'm thinking about that.
Yeah, in some situations we are, but usually there can be one, but it's never been none, right? In all the years, we've never had someone say, nope, it doesn't come into any of this. Now, sometimes we might not want to admit it, right? Might not want to admit we're an attachment to something or whatever. But then you think about it, it's like, yeah, it's true, right? The power of these questions is it elevates your consciousness into a state of awareness. And awareness is where all the magic happens. Most people are asleep. And my whole goal really is to wake up people, because we say with our company is we want to elevate your mind and skyrocket your business, because they don't happen in silos, right? You have to do both together. And what's beautiful is the same formula that works on your mind and your consciousness and healing you from those feelings that trap you is the exact same one that grows your business at the same time. So a lot of people think, oh, I got to work on my business, hustle and grind, hustle and grind. And then they get to that million, right? And what do? They start to self-destruct.
Yes.
And they start to burn out and they start to doubt. And that block starts to become bigger than their triumph. And they wonder why millionaires go broke 3.5 times before they're able to keep it, right? That's why we say think bigger, move faster, rise higher, and stay there. So you've got to do both sides of the track, right? You've got to have the track to run on for your mindset, but also for your business. And when you have those two things running in harmony, it's so easy to grow to $1 million business in a year, right? But when you try and do it separately, you're not going to do it. You're not going to be able to sustain it. And you're going to do what most people do, right? They go through this roller coaster income. And we say you got to get on a rocket ship and hit your moonshot. And the only way to do it is to make sure you master your mind while you're mastering your business.
Yeah, I love it. You're definitely speaking my language. So in my coaching business, there's a formula that I use that I just created after many, many years studying successful businesses I was working with, and looking at why certain businesses succeed when other businesses fail. And the very first part of that formula is always around mindset. And if you can't get that component right, then we do start to see those areas where, you know, a business will hit a wall or where they lose everything that they've had. And so if you can get that piece right, there's obviously other pieces to it, but that is certainly the most important part. And it always starts with you, me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you can, I mean, the truth is, and you've seen it, I know you've seen it in business where some people don't address it and you know, they put it off and put it off, but ultimately then they come back and they're in that existential crisis, right? Like, I got it all. I got the money. I got the family. I got the this. And I feel like I have nothing.
Yeah.
It always comes around and gets you. You can't ignore it.
That's exactly right. So we're going to put a link in the show notes to where the audience can purchase your book SOAR, because you go deeper into each of those blocks. And I want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to purchase that book and learn more. So I'm curious, what is this? So today, what is the story that you tell yourself about yourself?
Well, it might sound really arrogant that I'm perfect.
Okay.
I think everybody's perfect. So if you come from that, and that I think is generational. My mother always said, "Oh, you're perfect," and that's what I believe. And that perfect doesn't mean I'm perfect and better than anyone, right? But I am the perfect expression of me at this level of awareness and consciousness, right? So for everything I know and everything I am, I'm the perfect example of somebody at that level, right? And tomorrow I may be more evolved or less evolved, and then I'm perfect at that level. So that I don't beat myself up for, you know, going into a fit or not accomplishing something, or something like that. You know, we talk about, you know, the power of the ego, because we all have one. And it's not that bravado ego. We always say name your ego so that you're not beating yourself up. So, right, my ego's name is Monica. And so when Monica has a fit, I just say, oh, Monica was walking my dog Winston that day. It wasn't me. So I kind of keep that, you know, that's that. I'm able to see myself from that perspective.
Yeah.
But me as a whole being, right, as a child of God, I'm perfect. How can you come and not be perfect from perfect? So it's just the outer opinions, right? The outsourcing that tries to tell you you're not perfect. And so if I come from that thought of being perfect, how do you think my next feeling is going to be, and
Mm.
my next action, and my next result, and then my next thought. So I don't believe in trying to justify finding flaws or imperfections, and like nobody's really perfect. We're all perfectly imperfect, if you want to go there, but to not acknowledge your greatness, because that's really what we are. We might have inherited other thoughts that made us doubt it, but we are really perfect. And I would love more people to just be comfortable saying, yeah, I'm perfect. And people say, hey, how are you? And I'm like, perfect. And I love to watch people kind of bristle like, no, you're not. But we all are. And so if we're all perfect, why are we competing? Or why are we putting people down, or, defining people? As Soren Kierkegaard says, to label me is to negate me. And that's
Mm.
huge. What if we all took the labels off and we only had one label of perfection,
Yeah.
right? You're
Well,
not fat or thin or yellow or green or blue or red or whatever. You're just perfect.
yeah, that's a beautiful expression. I'm glad you shared that, and I I love the fact that you've named your ego. That's wonderful.
It's really fun. So, when someone says, oh, I see Monica's cooking dinner tonight, right? I don't get angry. I laugh because it's fun, right? And I recommend couples especially to each have their own Monica name, their own name for their ego, so that you can call that person out and wake them up and say, so Monica did the laundry and my whites and my reds, right? Rather than you ruined my clothes. Oh no, Monica does the laundry. I don't do domestic chores. Um, so yeah, it makes it fun. I mean, life should be fun and happy, and we've got to stop taking ourselves so seriously all the time.
Yeah, for sure. So, what are the characteristics that you see of those who are creating extraordinary results in their life and business?
It's so fun to watch, isn't it? Um, if you look at it, you see patterns, right? Especially in business, and especially right now. I love this time. Any cycles of downturn are always what I like to say: money is made in the meltdown, right? And we use the same formula because it's what I did, right? To make $4 million, multi-million dollar companies, I reverse engineered my whole process to figure out how did it work, right? I did a pivot last year. I knew we were going down, right? I've always watched people and predictable human behavior, but there's predictable behavior in society and business, right? If you study history. And so we knew that it was coming down, which means there's going to be a great uprising for a lot of people. And so what we say is the predictable things that we've seen is, number one is kind of a four-dimensional model, is being very distinguished, right? And not blending in, getting out of that red ocean and distinguishing yourself from everybody else. And that's why we call our group the iconic entrepreneurs, right? Completely standing above from anything else, not trying to fit in. And so you distinguish who you are, and that's where you find what is that unique thing? What is your snowflake quality that makes you different from everybody else? Because you are, right? You have
Right.
a different perfection that makes you stand out from everybody. And if you can hone in on that, and we spend a lot of time getting that right? Make sure you're following the right thing. You can't do a business around somebody else's personality. Do it around yours. That's when it really grows, because you love that part of you. So get really distinguished. And you'll see that in huge companies. They have a one distinguishing factor. They're not multiple, trying to please all these different markets. They focus on that one thing, that singular focus.
Yeah.
That's always the key. And if you have that, you can continue moving forward. But you never grow without that singular focus, right? And trying to separate, you have to be singularly focused and be singularly focused on your one distinction. So once you get really distinguished on who you are, who you serve, what's that market, who's your unique client, then you can disrupt a market. You can totally own your own lane because nobody's in it, right? Everybody's in the congested lanes, and you have like your own path, right? From that state of being distinguished, you don't have to worry about following people and copying. You can do your own thing because you're setting your own trail. People will look to you and you will start to disrupt the market because people are like, what's going on with that person? How come they're growing? How come they're getting all this? You can also charge a lot more and have a higher value client base when you're distinguished and you disrupt your market, right? Because there is no comparison. And then when you have that and you have all that attention and you have that unique ability that nobody can duplicate, guess what? You can start dominating the market. And you get into what we call the, instead of attachment, to being like everybody else, you're in the attraction phase and appreciation. It's like you have a house that has to appreciate, your business will appreciate, and people will appreciate you, your clients appreciate you, they talk about you, you attract really quality talent to your team. You have to have a team to grow. And so all of that starts to come together, and that's the phase where you really start rolling in the money and the growth and all of that. And so when you have that distinction, you've disrupted a market, you're starting to attract attention and clients, and then you have it down. You've got all your systems, everything is flowing, and then you duplicate it. So it's really, it comes down to 4 simple steps, right? Distinguish, disrupt, dominate, and then duplicate, and do it again in another vertical market. Maybe you just duplicate with a bigger team, or maybe you say, okay, now I can let go of this and it's running on autopilot. Now I can really focus on my legacy play or whatever you want to do next. So that's really the pattern that we see that people go through, but it all starts with that singular focus. And if you miss that, you're just going to keep spinning and like, I don't know my market, I don't know my purpose and all of that. If you hear that with clients, that's usually what happens.
Yeah, and that's where the clarity comes from, having them go through that process to identify and get crystal clear on what you do, why you do it, who your ideal clients are, the markets that you serve. And these are the steps that you took to build the businesses that you built.
Right, right. Because clarity is paramount, right? When you're not singularly focused, it's really hard to be clear. And then people wonder, why do they get all this shiny object syndrome and they get distracted? It's because they're not clear. But when you're clear and you're singularly focused, then you can focus, right? You can go take ownership and just go drive on that thing, right? You're not distracted. You know your target. And as you're doing that, then you get into that momentum phase. That's where you start, dominating the market. And then you get into what we call rest. That rest phase, we all need rest. And that rest phase is where you can duplicate, but that's where the freedom is, right? Because we don't go into business to just see your name on a wall, right? We really do it to create something that also frees us from having to work for other people, from having to follow other rules. We can create our own environment. And that ability, the reason we focus on that $1 million is it gives you choice, right? When you don't have the money, you just don't really have choice. It's either A or B, or you have to say no to everything. But when you have the money, you just put those little worries aside, right? And you can start looking at a bigger picture, a bigger impact. We say, be the rock, not the ripple, right? Be the one that makes the difference rather than is caught up in other people's shadows.
Fantastic. Well, I appreciate you sharing that. And before I ask my last question to you, could you share with us where we can connect with you? What is the best place, the best resource? And we'll make sure that we link to all of these in the show notes.
Sure. So my website is my name, koniscavella.com. I do a 7-figure workshop every few months. So if people are interested in going from 6 to 7 figures in a year, just go to the 7-figure workshop. It's and the number 7figureworkshop.com.
Okay.
And my book, I would love to get for all of your listeners a free copy of the book, so you don't have to buy it. I would love for you guys to learn the SOAR formula, not just the blocks, but also the solution, right? Because they're super simple solutions, and that's why it works so fast. So if they go to thesoarformula.com, they can actually get a free copy of the book. If they want to buy the physical copy or the Audible, you can always go to Amazon and Barnes and Noble, but I'd love to give anybody who's listening a free copy.
You're wonderful. Thank you so much for that. Excellent. So here is my last question to you. What's one of the most valuable lessons you've learned from failure that's had the greatest impact on the work that you're doing today?
Mhm. That failure is feedback.
Mm,
I don't look at it as failure. Giving up, yeah. Then I would say that would be failure. But I always say, like, there's so far to go. Um, you, Having that near death experience gets you in touch with infinity. Like, you think you're really far and you're like not even close. And so I keep saying, like, every day I keep pushing against my level of knowledge, and it's hard. And then I break through, and then there's another one, and there's another one, right? And it used to be that maybe once a week I'd hit my level, right? And now as I keep growing and we're growing really, really fast, I feel like hitting these walls of knowledge and my capacity about 3 or 4 times a day.
wow.
And you want to just like, oh, come on, just let me through. Um, but every time it's amazing, because when you break through what feels like failure or a wall, it's like, wow, right? It's breaking through that yellow tape at that finish line. It's like, yes, I did it. And then there's more knowledge and there's more knowledge. And it's the same thing when I was in that, what I call the Holy Archives. And there were just like volumes and volumes of books everywhere. I just had to touch the outside border of a book and it was all in my head. And it just showed me knowledge is infinite. There's so much we can learn and do. And to think that anyone would stop at a little wall, it's not failure. It's just feedback. Like, okay, now my feedback is this is as far as I knew. Now I'm going to take it to another level. And I've never gone down, right? You just keep learning more and more and more. It's not like you get dumber and dumber and dumber. you get you get more expansive, and it's so cool. So yeah, it's just, there's not failure. It's feedback, and it's perfect, right?
I love that. What a great way to frame it. Well, Koni, thank you so very much for being here
Thank
today
you.
on Business
Thank
Minds
you.
Coffee Chat and sharing of your experiences, of your story, sharing of your wisdom, and providing some great information for our listeners to take back and to apply. And that's what this is all about. So thank you. I'm very grateful for you.
Oh, I'm very honored. Thanks for having me here. And I'm really impressed with what you're doing here and the impact you're making in the world. So thank you, Jay.
Well, thank you. You're very kind. And for the rest of you, thank you so very much for watching. And if you found value in this episode, you know what to do. Go ahead and like and share. And also be sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel. The subscribe button should be right about here. And until next time, stay healthy and optimistic. Keep learning and growing. And remember that transformative change in your life and business always begins with you, and nothing happens until you take action. And we will see you on the next episode of Business Minds Coffee Chat. Take care.